His obvious next move is to double down, to impose, to send in, if he was sending 700 missiles a day, to send in 1,500 missiles a day and do whatever he can to just absolutely destroy Ukraine in the next 50 days. It seems, he's got a sort of carte blanche, do whatever he wants in the next 50 days.
There are two aspects to Donald Trump's announcements on Ukraine. First, the military. Billions of dollars worth of weapons will be sent to Ukraine to help with the war against the invading Russians, as long as European nations pick up the bill. The second is financial. The president says if Vladimir Putin doesn't agree to a ceasefire deal in the next 50 days, Russia and its trading partners will be hit with 100% tariffs. The idea is to pressure China and India into persuading President Putin to give up the war. Well, will it work? We'll examine the military aspect later on the programme, but to discuss the financial implications, we can speak now to Sir Bill Browder, once the largest foreign investor in Russia, who became Vladimir Putin's number one enemy. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
How do you think that the Kremlin, Putin, will have reacted to this announcement from Donald Trump?
Well, I think Putin is continuing to laugh at Donald Trump. The announcement was that if Putin didn't negotiate and didn't do a ceasefire, then 50 days from now, there would be these sanctions. Why 50 days? If you remember, this whole thing started many months ago where, where Donald Trump demanded an immediate 30-day ceasefire. Vladimir Zelensky agreed to it, and then Putin didn't. And then Putin said, we need to negotiate. And then there was all sorts of back and forth about a partial ceasefire on certain aspects. And so Putin is sitting there thinking that, he can wait out the 50 days in the same way as Donald Trump has made all sorts of threats about tariffs that haven't come through. And Putin is probably convinced that he will be able to carry on his war in the way that he always has, and that Donald Trump won't hold his feet to the fire.
Do you think the difference this time could be that it would be China and India that would be incredibly affected by these new potential tariffs, and that there might be some political pressure brought in the background on Putin from those two leaders to try and get him to change direction or reconsider a ceasefire? Is that a possible outcome here?
Well, it's a very disconnected outcome. And so first of all, we have to believe that Trump will actually follow through on this thing. So the second thing that we have to see is that whether the Chinese and the Indians just say, okay, we won't buy any more Russian oil.
Can they do that? Can they do that? Sure
they can. There was plenty of times in history when they didn't buy Russian oil. Oil is a fungible commodity. Many people around the world can sell them oil. The Saudis, the Emiratis, even the Americans can sell them oil. And then the third thing is, let's say that they did decide that this was an important issue to them, and they said to Vladimir Putin, Vladimir, please stop the war. I think that Vladimir Putin has got a lot of reasons to carry on the war beyond the urgings of China and India. And so I think that this is, it's better than nothing. It's better than Trump saying, we're not going to do anything. But the fact of the matter is that he could have done this yesterday. In fact, the United States Senate has a piece of legislation sponsored by a close ally of Donald Trump named Lindsey Graham, which would impose 500% tariffs on all people who buy Russian oil. That piece of legislation has 84 Senate co-sponsors. There's 100 members of the Senate, 84 of them have signed on as co-sponsors, which means that it could pass in a heartbeat. But Trump has pressured them not to put this in place. And so it all looks to me like Trump is in some way trying to do Putin a favor by adding this 50 days, decreasing it from 500% to 100%, maybe not doing it. It all reeks of continued Trump-Putin friendship, and Trump's sort of winking to Putin, say, listen, I've given you another 50 days, and then what happens after that 50 days?
That's such an interesting interpretation, because some of the language we've seen from Donald Trump over the last couple of weeks, and actually last night too, it seemed to be suggesting that he has grown tired and frustrated, and that he does now see through President Putin's remarks, his sort of continued talk about, yes, I'm into a ceasefire, I'm thinking about it, that actually Donald Trump has woken up to the fact that this is not going to happen. There is another question, though, and it was where Bill Browder was sort of going there, I think, which is that ultimately Donald Trump has pulled back from the brink a number of times. He's now called the taco president. And that's quite...
Trump always chickens out.
Exactly, and that's quite concerning, because if you do get a reputation for talking big and not doing a lot about it, it makes your negotiating tactic very difficult to replicate and repeat over and over again, because people just get wise to it.
Yeah, and we had Alexander Merezhko on, who's a Ukrainian MP, and he says if this happens, everything that's being talked about, it's a win-win-win. Yeah. But he's cautious that it wouldn't happen, and that's presumably the note that Bill Browder's striking as well.
I think Sir Bill Browder is back on the line with us. I don't know if how much of that question you heard.
I caught the first part of the question, and the answer is you were asking about whether the whole language makes everybody feel that much more, whether Trump's language is different this time. And I just want to remind you that when Trump, the day after he was inaugurated, he was using the same type of language in a tweet. He issued a tweet saying, if Putin doesn't negotiate, we're going to impose tariffs, taxes, and sanctions on Russia. This was the day after he was inaugurated. And so I wouldn't get too excited about the language today versus the language of 6 months ago.
Okay, that is interesting, because some people have interpreted that as a positive step, so potentially not as positive as maybe it had been seen as. Just turning to President Putin, what do you think he is going to do next here? Because the ruble rallied after this announcement from America. Clearly, there is a belief that Russia has been given, more time. What do you think Putin's next move will be?
Well, his obvious next move is to double down, to send in, if he was sending 700 missiles a day, to send in 1,500 missiles a day, and do whatever he can to just absolutely destroy Ukraine in the next 50 days. It seems, he's got a sort of carte blanche to do whatever he wants in the next 50 days. And then at the end of this 50 days, he can then say, okay, I'm ready to have a negotiation, and then enter into some complex negotiation where nothing really happens, as he's been doing all along. And Trump doesn't seem to be too worried about what he said yesterday, what he's going to say today. And so you have these situations where, he doesn't mind having said something 50 days ago, which doesn't come true. If you remember, during his campaign, he promised that the war would be wrapped up in 24 hours. I've heard him say that 50 times. And has that happened? Is he worried about that now? He doesn't seem to care about that. And so Putin is going to do everything he can during this next 50 days, and then he's going to look for an extension.
Yeah, and so things potentially could get even worse for Ukraine. Bill Browder, many thanks for joining us on the programme this morning.
Thank you.
It's important to have a cynical view or a sceptical view on all of this, because the other thing that occurred to me listening to that would be, if Trump is also selling arms to Ukraine, a forever war that America's not actively involved in, it's not actually the worst thing in the world for American industry, because they'll sell arms to NATO countries to provide to Ukraine. The war never ends. The money keeps flowing into US coffers. That is not nothing in this equation, you wouldn't have thought.